With the last season of Infinity Train released, I think most fans of the show agree that while each season was amazing, the story of Infinity Train doesn't feel complete. And to be honest, I have a feeling we'll be seeing more of the show in the future. Fingies crossed. So what's the setup? People board a magical train that can absolutely murder them, or at the very least, take up weeks of their lives. But don't worry, when they exit the train, it's like no time passed at all. Oh, no? Okay, so Narnia wins that one, got it. But passengers travel from car to car, exiting either by finding the door or overcoming some obstacle to unlock it.
Please don't kick me.
Why would we kick you?
Well, ma'am, the only way to open the doors and get out of this here car is if you kick me. But please don't kick me.
Cars can vary in intensity, from an art exhibit car with a monster that consumes your life force, or a car full of corgis. By traveling through the train and meeting denizens, residents of the train meant to aid passengers in their journey, the overall purpose is some good, free therapy. You learn lessons, lower your number, and when your number goes to 0, you get your exit. However, one could argue some people leave the train needing far more therapy than when they boarded. Infinity Train has some of the strongest storytelling in animation, and this lends itself to the show shifting its protagonists every season, all while keeping each individual story connected. And the show did break this mold a bit last season, because so far each season's protagonist has been a minor character in the previous season. So let's go through each season. The show is introduced with 13-year-old game designer Tulip boarding the train, and I think it was a perfect choice for an introductory character because we learn about the train through Tulip's perspective, meaning we share her same confusion and sense of wonder. And while I was originally wary of Tulip for sharing the same talented voice actor as my childhood nemesis, she eventually grew on me for having realistic flaws and interests. And even though the themes in Season 1 aren't as dark as later in the series, we understand that the stakes are higher than your average cartoon. The highlights of Season 1 are the incredible world building, unexpected lore, and the use of well-timed comedic relief.
Looks like I'll have to start writing his obituary.
The series is also great at foreshadowing. You immediately notice that a great source of Tulip's strife derives from changes at home, and the subtle way Tulip uses the train to cope with this is matched only by the gradual inclusion of Amelia as the false conductor, introducing the larger plot, but I'll talk Amelia later. Season 2 is by far my favorite season, and yes, because the main characters are a himbo and an angsty punk. Lake is Tulip's reflection, who gets a whole episode last season about breaking free and choosing one's own identity, and a lot of viewers point out how this lines up with an allegory for Lake being trans. Jesse is a pushover whose actions have gotten his brother hurt, and he needs to learn to stand up for himself.
But on your way back, think about your shortcomings and how you deal with them.
You got it!
The two befriend a deer named Alan Dracula, and as cartoon rules dictate, they have to be best friends now.
Oh, he's friends with both of us! Now we're friends too! By association, we're travel friends!
What? No.
God, none of the other characters had a chance of being my favorite. As Lake helps Jesse's number go down, Jesse promises Lake that they'll get off the train together, and it's a surprisingly wholesome ending. Very reliant on the suspension of disbelief, but wholesome nonetheless. Season 3 follows Grace and Simon, antagonists of the second season, who believe that Amelia is the true conductor and that the point of the train is to increase your number. As part of the Apex, they wreak havoc on the train and think of denizens as nothing, even suggesting last season to wheel Lake. You know, the person who can think and feel. So murder, essentially. Grace and Simon do objectively bad things, and Grace is so reliant on emotional manipulation at this point that she would make a better member of an indie band than any of the other passengers I can think of. There are reasons for this, as always, but reasons don't equate excuses. I can only assume that they entered the train without any instruction. Unlike when Ryan and Mingy boarded, and even denizens like Kez understood the train enough to explain it, Tuba is just as confused about the kids disappearing as Grace and Simon are. My guess is that Amelia fucked up with some of the potential therapy the passengers were supposed to get. Still love you, girl boss. Once Grace and Simon meet Hazel, a denizen they believe to be a young girl, tensions rise between them. Grace, voiced by the iconic Kirby Hal Baptiste, starts to learn lessons, and her number lowers. Simon, however, plunges further into despair, and in my opinion, Simon is one of the best written characters on the show. Lately, people started treating every boo-hoo moment as grounds for redemption. Don't get me wrong, Simon's story is tragic.
She was my tuba. And after a few months of helping me, she left me alone to die.
Simon.
Am I wrong? Did you leave me or not?
He faced a near-death experience after being abandoned by the only person he trusted on the train. And yeah, he and Grace didn't know how the train worked, but I'm so sick of seeing people say, it's never too late for redemption, because yeah, it kinda can be. It's never too late to work towards some level of atonement, but forgiveness is never owed to anyone. His situation is tragic, but he didn't take any of the steps that Grace took. And maybe he eventually could have reached a point where he thought, damn, I tried to murder my best friend and I actually did murder a lovely gorilla. Maybe I should dedicate the remainder of my time on this train to helping fix my mistakes. You know, like a certain sexy someone else. But he dies before this is possible. Yes, it's fucked up. No, it doesn't make him a good person and doesn't make the show wrong for killing him. You don't get to wait forever before you start fixing your mistakes. And when I saw Simon in the color-changing car, I saw that he had the capacity for change. I thought he started to. Apparently Tuba thought that too. Too bad. Tuba. Too bad. But Simon chose not to work towards atonement, and Grace did. And because Simon is a white guy with shaggy haircut and abandonment issues, somehow the show is evil for not letting him redeem himself, apparently. Also, I love that Grace is the only protagonist not to get her exit, because it shows that not all efforts towards redemption or atonement are on the same scale. So to have numbers that span an entire arm dissolve just as quickly as Jesse needs to stand up to bullies Kosei's number did, well, that would feel cheap.
We can't be the apex anymore.
Then what are we gonna be?
Guess we'll have to figure it out.
Anyhoozles, Season 4 breaks the mold because not only does this season take place in the 80s, during the time leading up to Amelia taking over the train, but also because Mingy and Ryan aren't characters in any of the previous seasons. However, this is the best introductory episode in the series. The split frame, the fact the characters board the train together, the use of music to express feelings and connection. We learn that Ryan doesn't think things through, and that Mingy doesn't follow his heart as much as he follows a script. And the outcome is predictable. They both work on their faults to rekindle their friendship and gain an exit. It's by far the most lighthearted season, even if it had its moments, so if this does end up being the last season, I can't be too mad. It couldn't have ended on a more uplifting note. Not to mention that this season revived a lot of the dry humor that Infinity Train is known for.
I thought it was a vending machine. I wanted some gum.
You can chew gum?
I guess I'll never know now, will I?
Humor I found to be, probably intentionally, lacking in Season 3. Kez's character can use humor to either diffuse the tension between Ryan and Min, or heighten it, depending on what the plot calls for. We also have a little teachable moment with Kez learning to apologize, but also learning that she doesn't mess up everything. Wholesome. Alright, so each season used its protagonist differently, and what I like is that the setting never changes. But it does. What I mean is that every story takes place on the same train, but it also uses flashbacks in order to add nuance to the experiences on said train. Also, the train is literally endless, with whole worlds in some cars, meaning that while the setting is technically the same, the seasons don't reuse too many specific places. That's why I feel like Infinity Train's story isn't complete. Not only do we not see the conclusion of Amelia, Hazel, and Grace's stories, but we also haven't seen nearly enough of what the physical train has to offer. The possibilities are, quite literally, endless. And the story never runs dry because of the changing protagonists. Infinity Train places just as much focus in the season arcs as the overarching story. Which brings me to Amelia. So when Ryan and Mingy were learning about the power of friendship through music, Amelia was somewhere on the train coping with her fiancé's death. Or rather, taking over the train after learning about its setup through 1-1. Decades later, Tulip discovers the truth about Amelia after randomly finding 1-1 in the snow car. Tulip reverses the therapy onto Amelia, who then decides to work for 1-1 to make amends. Jesse and Lake's story takes place after the train is back on its original track, train puns, which means Amelia's plot has little to do with theirs. Grace and Simon, believing Amelia to be the true conductor, are left in shock when they meet Amelia and learn the truth. Amelia leaves with Hazel, and we're all still waiting for the continuation of that story. And the pacing of the show is great. I think it's because it never bites off more than it can chew, never adds too many characters or stays too long on one story. When a character's arc is finished, it's finished. You get a glimpse of what happens next, and that's it. As for the actual production of the show, the art style is nothing to write home about. It does what it has to do, but I think like most shows, the simplicity of the art style is what allows it to do so much and be so flexible. And in a show where the setting technically changes every episode, this is a good call. I also love the way technology is the replacement for this universe's concept of magic. We obviously have to suspend our disbelief, but everything comes back to numbers, to a science. It's an interesting take on the whole into the rabbit hole type of story. The soundtrack is good, but once again, nothing too over-the-top spectacular, until Season 4, where music was the central focus. Train to Nowhere gets me, man. And yeah, I don't have much to critique here, but whenever I want to review a show, it's usually because I like it a lot, so consider Infinity Train a top-tier show for me, and if you haven't seen it already, please consider giving it a watch.